Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation. We will be getting started shortly. Please drop a note in the comment section. Let us know where you are joining us from, and we want to make sure that you are engaged in the conversation. Good evening. Um, and feel free to drop in comments and questions in the comment section as we go through the night's conversation. But looking forward to starting soon. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be starting shortly. Let us know where you are dialing in from. I think I think we have one of our first. Hey, Lewis, how are
Hey,
you?
what's going on? Let me log out and come back in so I can get my life right. I need a V8. I don't know if I'm upside down, right side up, but I think life is imitating art right now. So I'm gonna log out and come back in.
No problem.
All
No
right.
problem. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We will be getting started shortly. Um, okay, we have the Twin Cities Young Professionals tuning in. Love that. YP's in the house. Let us know where you are dialing in from, and um, we will have our guests on soon. I think this is going to be a really great conversation and an important one. I don't think we get to talk about this issue enough. So I hope you all came prepared with your questions, with your comments. It's going to be a great conversation. Urban League of Philadelphia, that's what's up. So great to see you. All right, Lewis, you got it.
Back. I'm back. Everything is resituated now.
Well, it's good to see you. Oh, looks like we have LA in the house. Looks like we have LA in the house and others. So, in the interest of time, because I know this is going to be a rich conversation, we have a couple other folks that are going to join us. Um, but I would love to jump in and get started. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Do you have it, Lucy? You want to try muting yourself just to see if the echo goes away?
I never. Okay.
All right. Okay. I think it works. Looks like we have Tyrone. Okay. I think we have everybody. Hey, Tyrone, Chester. I think we're going to have. All right. Let's see. Hi. I think we have everyone on. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Um,
We're supposed to add the sound, bro.
so just while we're started and while you're not talking in the interim, do you want to just mute your mics? Because I know we have a couple of folks on. I just want to make sure we avoid feedback, but obviously unmute yourself
Sound.
um, when you are ready to jump in and respond. So let me just take a step back and set up this
Yeah.
conversation. I know we have folks joining us from all across the country, so I want to say welcome. Thank you to all of you for tuning into Justice Now. It's the National Urban League's IG Live series where we talk about a whole host of issues that are impacting our communities. We talk about justice, we talk about equity, we talk about
I was
all of
supposed
the
to add
things.
19.
Um, and for those of you who haven't joined us before, I'm Jerica Richardson, and I serve as a Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the League.
Yeah.
So
X out for a second.
sorry for the sirens in the background. I'm in New York.
Says
So
leave. You have to
this is
leave.
what happens when you have these live conversations. It's live and unscripted, and we have all the things going on. But I just think it's important for us to acknowledge, as so many of us know, mass incarceration in America has had a devastating impact on so many communities, but especially communities of color. And I just want to be clear. I want to lift up a few stats for those of you who have joined us. All right, getting Chester back on. So 1 in every 3 Americans has a criminal record. And when we're talking about those records, they range from just a simple arrest record to an actual conviction. And these convictions, no matter how mild the crime, create collateral barriers to many things that we, take for granted in American life: voting, housing, healthcare, mental health, family unification, education, and employment, just to name a few. So we can talk about all the stats. We could talk about the fact that we already know communities of color, Black and brown communities, those with folks in our communities that don't have criminal convictions often make much less than their counterparts. We can talk about the amount of money that goes into the criminal legal system and mass incarceration: $295.6 billion, $295,000.6 billion. It's an astronomical number. I'm sure I just butchered that stat. But what I really want to focus on today is acknowledging, while the system is not perfect, that the gentlemen that I have on with me actually are perfect examples of what it means not just to survive, but thrive in the journey back home. And so April is Second Chance Month, and I really want to focus on what we do to make our communities, our families, our people whole, and really focus on what restorative justice looks like. And we need to be honest about mass incarceration in America and the impact that it's had on so many of us. So with that, I really want to turn the floor over to our amazing speakers. I'll introduce them briefly, but then I want to jump right into the conversation. And so you all, this is a family conversation. So if there's something someone says that you want to chime in on or expand on, let's just do that. I want it to be really free-flowing. So first, I'd like to introduce Chester Hallman. Chester is with the Urban League of Philadelphia. He is working as a case manager. And Chester has an interesting story and experience. He spent 28 years in prison until 2019, when he was exonerated with the help of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. And Chester, you've been doing amazing work. We are so proud of what you've been doing here in the Urban League movement, and definitely want to hear a little bit more about your experience and the work that you do on the ground. But before I go to you, Chester, I want to also introduce Lewis Reed, who is a friend of the movement. Lewis is a social justice expert. He is also the former senior director of strategic partnerships for Jay-Z's Reform Alliance. Look, Lewis has been doing many things, and like Chester, you both have had your stories told in many different ways on many different platforms. So we'll get into that. But Lewis, you've been producing recently for the Hulu Unprisoned series that's out right now. I encourage you all to check that out as well. Chester was on Innocence Files. And then we're also joined by Tyrone Walker. And Tyrone is Director of Reentry Services at Georgetown University's Prison and Justice Initiatives Program. And Chester, like Lewis, Tyrone, like Lewis, like Chester, has spent time behind the walls and have actually been out in the community and really transforming lives as a result of it. And I will say, just reading your bios, 67 years between the three of you spent incarcerated. I mean, that's an astronomical number, and speaks so much to a lot of the challenges that we see in this country. But really want to hear from you all what that experience has meant for your lives and how it's impacted the work that you do. And so really want to hear about how you found your niche in this space. And I want to hear each of you talk a little bit about the projects that you're working on, and then we'll dive deeper into the conversation. So Chester, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, sure, sure. I'm Chester Holman, like as said. I served 28 years in prison in Pennsylvania. I was released in 2019 as well as exonerated. And I now work as a case manager with the Urban League and alongside our director, Dennis Nicholson. But we just basically go inside the prisons and I just try to, give hope and inspiration, just based off my travel, my journey. Having a life sentence with no possibility of parole is something I never thought I'd experience in my life, and or nowhere close to it. And when I was given a life sentence, I didn't know it meant forever. I thought it was 20 years, potentially. Even though I knew I was innocent, I said, okay, 20 years. But when I found out it was forever, it was over. That was the end of the line. It was just like, what do I do? How do I deal with a life sentence at 21 years old? Especially coming from where I came from. I grew up in a middle-class family, grew up in the church. Grandfather was a Baptist minister, and my uncles were deacons. So we was always church something in our life, every week. And so when all this transpired, it was just like, how can this be? And I just never would have believed that the system could allow such a situation like this to happen, where be totally innocent. And now here I am with my life over at 21 years old. And, that experience, I think, helped to put me in this space today, because I knew where I wanted to go with my life, but I wasn't absolutely, sure of it. But once this all happened, it was like, it kind of breaks you, because there's no hope. This is the end of the line. All the rest of your life is prison. So when I finally came out, it was just like my eyes were like, I want to say opened, but it was more so my heart, because I realized that the little things that I had missed. Like for many years, we couldn't walk on the grass. I didn't walk on the grass for like 20 years. We had to stay on the compound. Everything was regimented. Time is 6 o'clock there, 1 o'clock count. Everything was just like, And so coming home to be able to go about my life and do things, it was just like, it just gives you a new perspective and a new appreciation for the things around us that I think a lot of people take advantage of, or they don't appreciate enough. And me doing this work is just like, because I've been there and I know the difficulties and the heart, gut-wrenching feelings that it can do to someone. And I just try to inspire hope, because 28 years is, it's not no short time, and
Not at all.
to be able to survive it and come out and, like I said, if I can do it, anybody can really do it. It's just like I said, I think it's just all a mindset and a desire and a will. 'Cause this is the only life we're going to get. You get one life. So whatever happens in this life, we have to just, take the hit and keep on moving. And that's what I just try to push that message. Take the hit. It's unfair as it may seem, and you still have to finish out the rest of the race. And that's what I try to do is I inspire, or try to inspire, those who are in similar situations.
Well, and Chester, you absolutely are. And, to me, it's so moving to hear about how you turned your pain into purpose.
Yes.
And I saw Lewis nodding when you were talking about not being able to walk on the grass and that experience. Lewis, why don't you share a little bit about, what life has been for you beyond release, the work that you're doing, and how your experience has inspired you to do the work that you've been doing for so many others and for folks that have had similar experiences.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, first and foremost, let me do a sound check. Are you getting feedback now? Okay, good. Just hearing Chester's story, it just reminds me that my worst day out here on the street was better than my best day on the inside. And, in effect, when I think about what does a second chance look like, and obviously we'll get beyond this particular, we'll delve more into the weeds of this conversation. But in all actuality, what my transition has been is just been grace in operation. That's it. Chester talked about coming from a spiritual and or religious background. I'm unapologetically a believer in the gospel of Christ. But irrespective to whether or not you are Muslim, if whether or not you're Jewish, you're 5%er, you are a believer of Christ, etc., grace spans the spectrum and it transcends every denomination that you could think about, every faith that you might espouse, and or every facet of life that you can walk in. That's what grace is. Grace is about giving people another opportunity on top of the other opportunity that they didn't realize that they had the 3 opportunities before that. That's what grace in operation is. And so when you look at my life post incarceration, that's what you were looking at. You were looking at grace personified. You are in effect looking at when I have the benefit of providing consultation on a film like Unprisoned, when I am in spaces, with people who got more degrees than a thermometer, when I am in spaces with people who have a degree of public notoriety, when I'm coming out of the corner store bodegas with people who are literally trying to make it in life. You are having conversations with people who have moved in grace, who have walked in grace, even if they don't necessarily acknowledge it themselves. And so, but for the grace of God, there would have gone a lot of us. In effect, when you think about what my career trajectory has been in and out of incarceration, that's what it embodies. It just embodies grace.
Thank you for that, Louis. I definitely believe in a God of second chances. And so, as you said, no matter what you believe in, I think we all deserve grace. We all are human beings. We all have fallen short. We've all had a second chance at some time or other in our life. And I think we'd be lying if we say we didn't. So I think that point was really salient for me. And Tyrone, I want to turn to you. You've been doing amazing work with the Pivot program. You've been engaged in policy and so many other things. Tell us a little bit about your experience and how it informs the work that you do today.
Well, you kind of summed it up. Like, you go through all that pain, like of being incarcerated. Like I was 19, and my attorney told me I had 57 years to life, and I was numb to that. I was 19 years old, and it wasn't until I met my mentor, who I met on my bid. He had been in 20 years, and he started teaching me about law. And he asked me, like, who told you had 57 years? I said, my attorney. And he said, flip that paper over. I flipped the paper over, and it was 127 years and 8 months to life on the paper. He said, that's how much time you got. He said, I don't know what that lawyer told you. And he made me one promise that he kept, is that he was going to teach me how to research laws. He was going to teach me how to write motions, but he wanted me to first learn to be educated and do everything for myself. That was the best gift I've ever been given in my life, to somebody to love me through knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and knew that that's what I needed to grow into the man I am today. It was because of his work. That was grace, as Lewis spoke about. Somebody took a liking to me and said, you made a mistake in life. At 17, you took a person's life. And I'm forever sorry for that. But I'm not that 17-year-old person today. I can't change that. I know I caused a lot of pain, not only with the family or the person's life I took, but my family too. I can't change that. But going forward, I've used that pain to transform the lives of people that I work with today. I use that pain. So going through that whole pain of just being incarcerated, I learned something from it, something so valuable that most people in the community don't have time for. And that is to sit and learn and read. Most people don't have that type of time to sit and learn, right? And so I've been given that opportunity, right, to be able to learn something very different from the people I was around, even while I was serving my sentence. You know, as Lewis, like I never thought that I was gonna get out. I thought I was gonna die in one of those cells. Because that's essentially what you have. You have that life sentence. You know, in DC have this weird thing that's going on with the laws. That if you are charged with a felony in DC, now you're being housed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah.
And you can wake up at any moment and be in any one of those 120 plus prisons around the nation, and you from the nation's capital. So that pain turned into a passion now to help others. All we did was just took that same pain and we just say, you know what? I got a stomach for this. I got a stomach for helping people and to like overcome a lot of the barriers that we face and like helping them propel to get to the next level. Because we all want to, we all want to do something with our lives. But if we're not given the opportunity to do something with our lives, then, we're not really helping people. So I always say here at Georgetown, if the least of us is not being serviced, no one is being serviced.
Amen to that. I think it's really important, and I know I want to dive a little bit more deeply about what is life like on the other side and what does second chances look like. I mean, are the opportunities for those that are coming home, are they what they should be? Are we doing enough? But before I get to that, I just, Tyrone was talking about education, and I think it's critically important to have education centered in this conversation. Education, whether you're incarcerated, or education where that you're pursuing it upon release. But I really think there needs to be a lot of education in America about the system itself, what it's doing, the impact it's having. And I think without education, we're not really able to move forward. Lewis, I do want to turn to you because I know you were heavily engaged and involved in the First Step Act and advocacy and educating a lot of lawmakers across the country about mass incarceration and its impact, the financial burden in America as well. And you were able to work with Van Jones and Jessica and Aaron and others, really to get bipartisan support and get this passed. And I know there's a documentary out right now chronicling that, and I encourage folks to take a look at it so you can learn a little bit more about the story. But how did you get folks into a place and space where they were open to policy change to essentially give more of our people a second chance, an opportunity to really pursue different lives and come back home? How did you get people to move in that direction? Because I think we see across this country, there's a lot of things that is very hard to get people, whether they're a Democrat or Republican or independent, to get them together and get them in alignment and move forward. How were you able to do it with this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And not only how were we able to do it, but how were we able to do it at a time when we had an arguably polarizing president? Let's keep in mind, we were trying to get this done when President Donald J. Trump was in office, we had a Republican Senate and a Democratic House in Congress. And so, it took strategy, but a large part and parcel of that strategy went into humanizing the experiences of people who have been incarcerated. People who have been incarcerated. Notice I didn't say ex-felon. I didn't say a returning citizen. I didn't use any of the other pejoratives that the system tries to assign individuals, right? The entire time that I was incarcerated in 14 years, I never met an ex-con. I never met a convict. I never met a felon. I met uncles. I met aunties. I met cousins. I met brothers. I met human beings. I met people who were returning back to our communities. And so when we walked into those spaces, you also have to consider one of the things that one of my advisors and very good friends, Glenn E. Martin, he coined the phrase, those closest to the problem are also closest to the solution, but often furthest from resources and power. And people don't seem to be affected by something until they are impacted by something. Let's not forget that Jared Kushner, having access to resource, power, influence, and affluence, he wasn't insulated from the criminal legal system. How so? We're not talking about a recent indictment by his father-in-law, former President Donald J. Trump. We're talking about his own father. And so when he was in a position to do something, he reached out to Jessica, he reached out to Van, i.e., just for the sake of our viewing audience, in the event, if you are unfamiliar with Jessica Jackson happens to be the chief advocacy and operations officer at Reform Alliance and former co-founder of Cut 50, the organization that led advocacy to get the First Step Act passed, which to date has released more than 25,000 people. And it is the only criminal justice reform bill that has been blessed by all three branches of federal government. Passed by the US Congress, signed into law by the United States President, and affirmed as of June of last year by the United States Supreme Court, which we are extremely proud of. But back to the above. When you have a conversation that, in effect, is grounded in empathy, empathy is inarguable. I'll tell you a very brief story just so that we can get our other thought leaders in on this conversation. I remember one meeting in particular we had with an unnamed high-ranking Republican senator. And we were in there and we were talking about strategy, well, not strategy, but we were going through the precepts of the bill, and we were going through the text. And then towards the end of the conversation, when we were leaving out, he said, "Hey, Lewis, can you stand behind?" And I stayed behind and I said, "Sure." He said, "I want to share something with you." And I said, "What's that?" He said, if I share it with you, you have to promise to hold it in confidence." And I said, "I promise I'll hold it in confidence. I won't name you." He said, "Cool." He said, "I wanted to share that I have a nephew, a surrogate nephew who's like a surrogate son to me, I should say, who's currently incarcerated. And my wife and I send him packages every month, but we do it anonymously because of the stereotype, because of the stigma that is associated with having a family member who's incarcerated. We come from a space of affluence. We come from a space of wealth. Our lives have, in effect, been prescriptive. You graduate by this date. You go to this school. You get married by this age. You cross on the green and not in between. And so, in effect, what he was sharing with me was that he was embarrassed by his nephew being incarcerated. But he said, as a result of hearing your story today, in hearing your personal experience, having been incarcerated, serving 14 years on a federal level, having at the age of 5 years old, both of your parents being incarcerated and serving time on a federal level. He said, "I am no longer going to send any packages, any books, any whatever into that institution anonymously." And so it was little things like that that transformed the hearts and minds of people. Oh, and by the way, P.S., that senator ultimately voted yay on for the passage of the First Step Act. But in effect, what I'm trying to land this plane by saying is this: when you have conversations with people, you will realize that common pain leads to common purpose. common pain leads to common purpose.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing the background of the First Step Act. Everyone may not be familiar, so it's really important for us to name those who've done the work, but also to name the wins. You know, we can't forget what has been accomplished so far, although we know we want there to be more, and we know we want to continue to work so that there are more folks that are able to live the lives you know, they've been designed to live, that God may have for them, that their family may have, that they want for themselves. And so I think empathy is obviously a game changer, and being able to change hearts and minds and open people up to thinking differently about the system, and thinking differently about the problems, and thinking differently about solutions. I do want to turn to you, Chester, and focus a little bit on what it's like when someone comes home. I know you have been working in the reentry space. I heard Tyrone earlier talk about resources. What does that mean? Because a lot of times there will be assumptions where people think, okay, well, you have family, you can just go home, you have a network, you have folks that you can just tap into, that support exists. And that's not always the case. Sometimes policies that are out there actually prohibit that from happening, depending what may be going on in one's particular family. But, you know, what's the initial journey like? What are the things that you talk to others that have walked this journey before? What are you telling them? What are you teaching them? What are you sharing with them? What are the things that are important for all of us to know? Because I think sometimes people hear about someone being released and they're like, okay, it's done. They got a second chance. But then what? We never ask the question, then what? The next time we hear a conversation about that is if someone has offended again or violated probation, but we're not talking about what we're doing in the in-between to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Oh yeah. I mean, coming home for me, first of all, it was unexpected. You know, my team had been fighting on my case for many years, Long Credit Innocence Project. So when it finally happened on July 15, 2019, it came, like I said, unexpectedly. And I wasn't necessarily prepared. So when I did finally get home, you know, I started looking for places because, like I said, almost 30 years, 3 decades. So the world was very, very different when I came out. And so I started looking for resources immediately because, like I said, I just felt lost. Even though I was excited to be home, I really felt lost in a world that was new. And so we started looking for resources, and there was nothing set up at the time for those who were exonerated. Everything was geared more towards programs that were for parolees. And so therefore I was kind of, I don't want to say I was denied, but I was steered in a different direction. And that direction led to nowhere. And so I immediately became depressed. And I'm saying to myself, how am I feeling this way? And I just, you know, spent almost 30 years in prison. I'm home now. How can I feel this way? But it was just so overwhelming to be here because I never thought I was going to make it out. So now to be here, it was just like, you know, what do I do? And I had, you know, been supported by my family the entire time. So now that I'm home, I didn't want to continue to be what I felt was a burden. And so therefore I didn't want to ask for anything. And, you know, I asked for nothing actually when I came home. And, you know, I just wanted to be in that space with them. So once we found a law firm that I went with, they hooked me with a social worker, and she started networking for me, and she found me a therapist. And I didn't realize I needed therapy at the time. You know, I didn't know nothing about therapy. And so when I got into therapy and I began therapy, naturally I was apprehensive, and I was like, you know, this isn't for me. I just did 28 years. You know, I got this out here. And I found that therapy is exactly what I needed. And you know, that's one of the things I do stand behind, and I push very hard is therapy, because a lot of guys that I know that have been in, you know, we feel like we're too tough, too macho, and, you know, it's not for me, and how can I open up? And I've been did all this time, and I've carried all this on my shoulders. I don't need a therapist. And You know, I've been in therapy now for the entire time that I've been home, and I was going 3 times a week. Now I'm going 1 time a week, and you know, that's my biggest thing, and that's what I try to push men that are coming out and that are out now with therapy. Like I said, carrying that burden around that life, I think can push into a direction that puts in a deeper hole. Because I'm going to share this, and I don't normally share this, but I was very suicidal, and it was something I wasn't proud of, and a lot of people weren't aware of. But because, like I said, I just didn't know how to release those feelings that I had kept in so long. You know, but in jail, you don't share your feelings. So to be home and you know, around my family, and you know, they're expressing all this love, and you know, I didn't know how to return that. You know, I hadn't hugged nobody. I wasn't hugging nobody, and you know, I wasn't sharing these things that I actually felt in my heart. So it was difficult. And now, like I said, I just try to inspire people by the way I live. I do more, you know, actions of my life rather than speaking. You know, I can tell you whatever I want to tell you, you know, but I just try to live my life through action. And you know, I truly promote that. And the program that we have with Pathway Home with the Urban League, you know, and this is, and also is Out for Good. That was another program that I went through when I first came home. And Out for Good is a program where we basically, guys that come home, we get set up, and I received a computer. You know, I never worked on a computer. They teach you how to do banking, set a bank account, how to fill out a resume. These are all things that we need to move forward in the beginning after, you know, being incarcerated. And now with Pathway Home, we try to catch them at the door. So we go inside the county prisons in Philadelphia, and we more or less, you know, get them set up for when they come out. So as soon as they come out, it's not like which direction are you looking? You know, we're already there. We're waiting for you when you come home, and we help them, you know, find housing, you know, employment, and basically just get on a path to whatever their direction they want to go, you know, in terms of their life. And you know, that's kind of where I'm at. But the biggest thing I would say, I support therapy. I truly do.
Hey, Jerica.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of echo.
Okay. So, do you still hear an echo with me talking right now? Okay. So I think we heard a little bit of an echo with you, Chester. So I think when we go back around, we'll just all make sure we mute ourselves to see if that makes a difference. But I want to say thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that on this conversation. You know, I go to therapy. I think there's a lot of us, and I know there's a stigma in our community about that. And I think it's incredibly important to have a place and a space where you can share, where you can process, where you can talk through your experiences. And I haven't had an experience that even compares to yours, so I can only imagine the weight that one is carrying after being incarcerated for so long. And I saw Tyrone and I saw Lewis nodding their heads. I know we've had conversations on this show, especially with men of color, and how difficult and how it's not something that's encouraged enough. But I really think it's transformative. And before, I don't just want to move on and jump away from there. We saw you getting a lot of love in the chat, and I think it was resonating with a lot of folks. So I just want to open the space up in case Tyrone or Lewis wants to share anything about mental health and that experience, and what type of support or investments we really need to do on that end for our family members, for all of us, for those who have been impacted.
I mean, I think like we need to go around about the education piece again, like, because a lot of families need to be educated. So like what we doing in the district is trying to make sure, like, if you can serve 15, 20, 25 years, so like it's different levels of reentry. If a person that did a month or two, he still got his ID and he still have his birth certificate. He still got all his vital documents, right? You know, if he'd been locked up with money, he still can go back to the place he was just staying in. Like, but when you serve a long term, you do a long term, like nobody live in those old neighborhoods. The family don't have them houses anymore. Like, and it goes on. And so, you know, I was fortunate enough to have my little sister. I love my little sister, who, you know, she essentially did nearly 25 years, you know, with me.
With
Yeah,
you, right?
with me. Yeah, with me. The day I walked out, she was there to, you know, like to give me that big hug and like welcome me home. And then I realized that even all the things that I knew about reentry, she didn't know them. Like it was places, things I knew I needed to do, but I didn't know how to get there. All right. And so what I try to do today is make sure that we connect our people with vital documents before their release, right? Because because we had an experience during the pandemic. People were coming home with no vital documents. Then they was learning when they get home that their social security number is wrong. And so it was taking 6 to 8 months before they get an ID. I mean, you can imagine what they're like, afraid of being stopped by the police and rearrested for not having an ID. And so this is the way we had to frame that conversation so they can start opening up the DMV to give people their IDs. Right? That was very vital. But I went to talk with a therapist. You know, they sat me down and talked to me like, well, no, I didn't need therapy, but it's things that go on. People look at us physically, oh, you look good, but mentally they don't know we a wreck. Like it takes a while to get back. You know, I noticed, like, I don't know if you noticed it, Chester, like every week my mind slowed down. Because when you come out, your mind is spinning so fast. You're trying to take in everything. You're trying to remember the places you used to go to. They all look different. The buildings look smaller. The houses look smaller. Everything look different, right? And you just trying to take in. And then, like, when you go to Walmart, that is so confusing when you get out. Because on the commissary slip, you know where everything is on the front and back. You know where every item is on the list. And then to be taken into a super Walmart is like it's too many choices. But families do need to be educated. Some people have tension in their families where the family don't want them to come there. And so they need some restorative justice around there, like to heal that family up so they can welcome that family member back in. Your family don't know you. You've been gone too long. You've grown up essentially in this abnormal environment. They don't know you, you don't know them, and that's going to take a minute to process too, because a lot of people were still thinking that I was the 17-year-old Tyrone, not the 44-year-old Tyrone that was in the community. And so it just really take a lot of educating to go on, and it's going to take time for people to get to know again.
Yeah, Jericho, I want to jump in for a second. I know that in the interest of time, we're brushing up against things, and my comments will be very succinct. First and foremost, I don't want to move away too far from, and I want to circle back to what Chester talked about. He says something that for a Black man, any man, but especially for a man of color, it takes heart, it takes soul, it takes strength to say publicly, not even to say to yourself privately, but publicly, that I was suicidal. I've had a suicidal ideation. You and I, we've talked about this, you know, up close and personal, right? Like I've had a suicidal ideation recently. I've experienced the very traumatic loss of my father. I experienced a very traumatic loss of friends. Experienced a very traumatic loss of my son. Very traumatic loss of my sister. That stuff right there, that stuff will cause life to make you walk to the highest mountain and want to jump off, especially when you don't have that intellectual acuity to be able to articulate in a safe space where you feel as though that you have a safe space. Hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling this way. So I wanted to circle back to Chester and let you know, brother, we see you. We see you, and I feel you. And I don't want you to think that your pain, there's not strength in that. And if ever, I'm going to get your contact information from Jericho. If ever you are ever feeling or experiencing what I call the new PTSD, prison traumatic stress disorder, I want you to pick up the phone and I want you to call me. You don't even got to text me. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I want to make sure that my voice is on your ears. And if I got to get on my knees and lift you up in prayer, if I got to get on the next thing smoking to get to you, I want you to know that you matter to me. You don't matter to nobody else on this live. You matter to me. I want to first address that. The second thing I also want to address is this notion of second chances, of second chance month. Yeah, that's cool. And that's patty cake. But truth be told, many of us ain't got a first chance. Many of us, we ain't start off with a first chance. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, what do you think about your work? And as it relates to what your calling is and what your purpose is. And the person that I was speaking to was a Christian, and she just happened to quote Jeremiah 29:11, where she said, God, you got an expected end, right? Look at everything that God has done for you. You've been in a room with Jay-Z and you work for this organization, you socialize with these people, so on and so forth, right? And she was listing that stuff off. And I said, yeah, you talking about an expected end, but many of us ain't had an expected beginning. Many of us ain't had an expected beginning. When you look at my beginning, both of my parents were incarcerated when I was 5 years old. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if that's okay. I don't hear it anymore. But both of my parents were incarcerated when I was 5 years old. My sister gets critically shot in the face by her then boyfriend, who she subsequently has a child by when I'm 13. I get critically shot in my chest and have to relearn how to walk when I'm 14. Best friend gets killed in front of me when I'm 15 years old, shot 6 times in the head. My cousin gets shot. My cousin was 16 years old, gets shot 32 times in front of his mother. In a span of 4 or 5 years in my adolescence, I've experienced more than most people have experienced in 3 lifetimes in terms of traumatic losses. So circling back to this notion of what does it look like to have a second chance, we need fair opportunities. We need a fair chance. We need you to take into account the vicarious trauma that we've been exposed to before we even got involved in the criminal legal system. Oh, and by the way, after we were there, the system is designed to diminish our humanity. Let's talk about that. And also let's talk about, after we leave incarceration, what does therapy look like for somebody like me? What does reading a book, literally, I got a book right here. I'm reading a book right now. It's called What Happened to You? It's by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. It's conversations on trauma, resilience, and healing, because I'm doing the hard work to make sure that I'm showing up as my better self, because I want to be better than what I was before. Look, I got to get out of here. I got a dinner meeting. Jericho, it's always great to see you. I love seeing you. I love being in conversation with you. And I also love being in community with both of my brothers, Chester and Tyrone. Chester, I want to make sure that you and I stay connected. Peace.
Thank you, Lewis. It was just so much to unpack. We definitely are going to have more of this conversation. I know, and I want to be conscious of time for you all. Trauma is real. And I will say, one of the things, just being here on the call, what I see, what's so important is a sense of community, and for folks to not realize that they have to walk this walk alone. And for all of us to talk about and be honest, it's not just the support that we need to provide for those who have been through the system, but also for their families. So how do we reunite our families? How do we connect people? How do we educate them? How do we get them the support that you need. You know, my family's been impacted, and as you said, you know, Tyrone, like that your family is going through it with you, and sometimes they don't even know the best way to respond or how to support you and all the trauma that they're feeling and experiencing, and we just don't want the cycle to continue. I was poignant what Lewis said about first chances. And I know for many of us and many of the folks that look like us, that's real. That's the reality. And so the experience just compounds itself. Um, but I want to be hopeful because when I look at you all and I hear your stories and see the amazing work that you're doing day in and day out and know the lives that you're impacting, that's something that we just can't gloss over. And so as we close tonight, I would love to give you each a couple minutes just to talk about, you know, advice you have for someone that may be new on this walk or on this journey. Um, is there any words of wisdom, any hope that you have for them and their family, any guidance? If there's just one or two things that you just want to lift up and share, any words of encouragement, because I think that's important. Hearing from you all who have gone through it and are coming out on the other side and thriving, and also helping others do the same. I think it would be powerful just to hear those words from each of you. Um, who wants to go first, Tyrone or Chester?
Okay, most people like this coming out, they need to really go, especially after you did this. If you do not have that, I strongly advise against going home to live with a woman, because you're going to go through things, right, that she's not going to understand. And that relationship is not going to last long, right? Because you've been confined so long, and it's going to be nights. And Chester, you know, like we don't sleep well, right? And so now that we are home, I may sleep 3 hours and get up and say, oh, you know what? I ain't been on a drive in 20-something years. Now I got a car. I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to drive. It's only just about me in that moment of realizing that, hey, man, I'm free. I'm actually free. And if you in a relationship, she thinking it's about a woman. You like, that's the furthest thing from my mind. Because most of us don't talk about the issues that we experience with a form of impotence sexually when we first get out. And so I make it a conscious effort to talk to people about that and like, no, you're not experiencing it. And have to tell them from a personal trainer's point of view that that's a muscle that just need to be retrained. You've been spending a lot of years pleasing yourself all the 2 minutes. That's all that muscle remembers. And so you have to talk about these things, and so you don't hear us talking about those issues because we don't know how to talk about that amongst each other. But I make it my business to talk about that so they can start understanding. Like, if you have a partner, she need to understand that too. See, it's so many different things that, you know, the trauma that we suffer, that people who never experienced it, and they are not compassionate enough to hang in there with you until you can like really start getting your life together. It's a whole process.
Thank you for that, Tyrone. Chester, is there anything you want to add? And I do want to say one of the things we didn't touch on was voting, civic engagement. So if there's anything to that piece before we wrap that either of you would want to share, want to make sure we lift that up as well.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing I would say is just take time to breathe. You know, just to breathe in the air. I think for me, it's just like it's based on the individual. I always look at it as, we're only gonna get one life. This is it. And there's no, after the day, there's no coming back around to this day. It's gone. And I look at life like that. And I just think that if people took that approach, I think things could be very different. But like I said, it comes down to each individual. And for me, I just believe in making the best of every opportunity that we're given. And like I said, I have every reason to be angry. I know that. These people, the system stole, my life. I don't have any children. I didn't get to fall into the career that I wanted, and go to college. I didn't get to do all that. So I have a reason to be angry. But my time on the inside, I watched so many men, walk around angry, and I see the effort that it takes. It's like a job to hold on to that anger, and I'm like, life is hard enough as it is. I'm not going to try to add to it, by holding on to this anger. Every time I get up every morning, I got to be mad. I got to be mad. Find a reason to be mad, even though I have one. To me, it just takes too much work. And I'm trying to live my life peacefully and enjoy these things that we have out here. And I just think more people took that approach. And we look for reasons to or causes or whatever we want to say to, I guess give us this. I don't know. But I just for me, I just believe that, like I said, just living our lives and trying to find that space, just going to propel us into the life that we truly want to live, and that's, like I said, most of us want to be happy. We all want to be happy. We all want to be safe, feel safe, and I just think that it's not impossible to do, and for me, that's how I live my life. And like I said, I try to live by example. I try to live by example, and that's kind of where I'm at with that, just promoting happiness, peace, and following that.
Well, I love that. And it is important to talk about what we choose. You all have chosen joy, you've chosen empathy, you've chosen investing in others, investing in yourselves, investing in the community. So I will say, as we're talking about second chances, there is also the chance and the choice that we have to choose another way, to choose something positive, to choose to turn the pain, the experience into power and power for our people. I want to thank you both for sharing your stories. I know there's a lot of information in the chat people shared about voting and how important it is. And I will say, from the National Urban League and from my colleagues and from our team here, we know how much power our community has. And I think one of the things that we're going to work to do this year and in future years is, one, educate folks who may be in jail and have in certain places and spaces and actually have a right to vote, and make sure that they know that those resources exist. And really want to educate folks, people that are coming home, about the laws where they are and their ability to really become a full citizens and exercise their right to vote. And then we're also going to go back and advocate for people that are incarcerated, are serving time, to make sure that they have access to those opportunities and to change laws where they need to be changed. It's no accident. It's not by happenstance. In states where we are not majority, where you don't see a lot of diversity in people of color, that in those places and spaces where you have folks that are incarcerated and predominantly white spaces and places, that they do have the right to vote. And so that's something that we are committed to doing. We are committed to giving second chances, but quite frankly, some first chances for folks that never got it. To make sure that when we're talking about these issues, when we're talking about restorative justice, when we're talking about mental health and investing in our communities and our families, and really changing this cycle and this experience for so many, that we have to do that with our vote. We have to do that with our advocacy. We have to tell our stories and really use our voices to make change, so that This conversation isn't about second chances. We're not applauding a second chance month. We really need a first chance and a second chance life for everybody in this country. And so I just want to thank you all for your work, your time, your leadership. And I don't want to say goodbye. I just want to say to be continued, because we know the work continues. Tyrone, Chester, thank you so much. And many thanks to Lewis for this conversation. And to all of you who've joined in, thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for your engagement. You shared so much information, and I hope you share this conversation with others. I think it was really an important one and a powerful one for me. So until next time, remember, the time for justice is always now. Thanks, y'all. Have a great night.
You as well.
Take care.
You as well.
You as well.